All right, guys. So, good morning, everyone, and sorry for the last minute disruption in the connectivity. We are here to discuss on Microsoft Identity and Access Management in your Microsoft 365 suite. I am Ronak here, and I would be driving you through all these understanding fundamentals of identity and access management that we have in, or you can say which are available as a part of the Microsoft 365 suite. And it is very much important for all of us to know how identity and access management works in today's world. The reason is very simple. Today, while we have our environment going from on-premise to the cloud, when we have the complete landscape of my IT infrastructure changing, it is act to be the username and the password for the users, which is going to be the most critical one and the one which needs to be protected. Reason, while we move to the next generation of technologies, while we move to enterprise mobility, while we move to the environment where I'm allowing users to do remote working like the way we are doing today since past a few months due to the pandemic, it is based on the identity of the user that the security of my data or my information relies on. Hence, understanding the different flavors or understanding the different security options that we have into IDAM in our M365 suite is extremely important. And that's where we stand today. So today we have our enterprise environment completely transforming from the traditional data centers on-premise and VPN connectivities to a lot beyond that, which includes things like IoT devices, which include multi-cloud platform solutions. Like there might be organizations who are probably using Microsoft 365 as the suite of applications. They might be using Dropbox to store the data. They might be using maybe the Salesforce cloud. They might be using the AWS cloud and a lot more. Keeping all of these in mind, I do not want my user to remember 10 different passwords or 10 different identities to authenticate separately on every platform that they go. That is where the identity of my users comes into the picture. I don't want my users to every now and then get authenticated using passwords. I don't want them to store passwords on the browser, or I don't want to put my environment at a risk at any cost while I am depending already on so many cloud providers to give solutions to my enterprise. In order to achieve this, the solution that we have, and which probably all of us are aware of, is Azure Active Directory. Now, if we today talk about Azure Active Directory, it probably might come up to us that Azure Active Directory is something that can authenticate across Microsoft platforms. It is the cloud version of the on-premise Active Directory. It is the cloud version of the native Kerberos and LDAP-based authentication that we used to do, and a lot more. But if we see where Azure AD stands today, it is altogether to a next generation of identity and access management, because it is not only limited to my, it goes beyond to all the cloud service providers. It is not limited to your on-premise or native applications. It can probably and manage identities on applications across almost any platform. It is not which requires a typical domain name and configuration to be done. You can have your third-party social identities as well collaborated on the Azure Active Directory platform. So I'm talking over here, as you see, that For Azure Active Directory, my identity provider can maybe my Facebook or my Twitter or even my Google Plus. Today, Azure Active Directory is not limited just to usernames and passwords or groups and group policies. It also takes you beyond to any kind of a device, may that be an Apple device, may that be an Android device, or may that be even a Windows device. Over a period of time, this is what happens when we talk about the identity journey, like where we stand when it comes to the identity of the users within my environment. It begins all from the security privilege accounts. It begins all from the kind of access that you give to the users and goes all together to the access on their workstations, may that be within the organization or outside the organization. They authenticate through your Active Directory that is on premise. You maintain time bound privileges. When you say time bound privileges, you define as to for how long can a user have an admin access. You define for what time on a particular device can a user log in, and a lot more of that stuff. You define identity lifecycle management and options for servicing, which mean that you can probably mention that you want to at any point in time just have a particular identity expired, you want a particular username or component expired, something of that sort, right? So sorry, just 1 minute, by mistake. Okay. Is my screen visible now, guys? Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yes. So we move further to implementing different methods of authenticating users across the on-prem and the cloud, which are hybrid identities, and which takes us all together to the latest modes of authentication using MFA on my devices to probably approve a kind of an authentication, or probably to have an access to a particular resource within my environment using a particular condition, something of that sort. And at any point in time, if my security is compromised or my account is locked out, then there are options which will allow me to self reset the password or self unblock my account. Each time that I try to do this, it need not require me to reach out to the administrator for any reason. And gradually, today, if we talk about authentication, or rather we can say talk about modern authentication, it is something which takes us to a level where everything is passwordless. What I mean over here is identity management today has gone to a different level altogether. If I have to log in to my banking applications, it does not require me to enter a password or not even a PIN number. It is either based on my biometrics or it is based on a trusted device. We have options to configure things like dynamic locks and smart locks, which makes sure that a particular smart device, like maybe a smart watch or a particular wearable device, is next to my laptop. It should be able to unlock that particular laptop, and the moment the device is gone far, the laptop or the desktop will be locked again. So identity and access management is not only limited to passwords. In fact, we are going passwordless today. While trying to achieve this, we need to go through 5 different parameters, or rather we can say 5 points for best practices. You need to strengthen your credentials by defining the most complex of complex possible passwords. And using those complex passwords, also you need to put something like an MFA, a multi-factor authentication in place, which protects your accounts from any kind of a breach. You block legacy authentication methods, like you don't allow a user to have an account without a password, or you don't allow the user to have a simple password, or you actually filter what kind of passwords can be used and what cannot be used. You put automation in place. Microsoft 365 as a suite in today's time provides you an option to set up millions of automation policies which can help you to protect your account each time there is a vulnerability identified. So probably if any kind of an account is at risk, or if there is any kind of an account breach that has been identified, it will immediately send an email to the user as well as the administrator in time which is as less as 5 seconds. Based on the anomalies that you identify, you need to increase the surveillance that you might do on your suit. And this all, believe me, guys, is something that you will aggressively set up in the M365 portal and will become a new normal for managing all your users within your environment. And once you do this kind of a setup, you enable self-help options, which means that you will actually set up help pages for the users, redirection pages for the users, and options where they can themselves reset the passwords or set the complexity level for their user account or whatever they wish to set up in order to have their account more protected. Azure AD is coming up very soon with something called as Cloud HR User Provisioning, wherein there will be many third party suits which are into HR management and systems like that, which will be able to push the user information to Azure Active Directory so that you can simply just add them to a particular group, or maybe even that can be automated. You can just enable the security protocol level and the user will be good to go. This means populating the identities in my environment is also going to be simplified. I now will not require to add every user individually, probably just a connector to my third party HR solution, and everything can be directly imported from that solution, or in terms of an Excel sheet, or maybe the user information that needs to be populated inside my Azure Active Directory. Azure AD Connect Cloud Provisioning. In today's date, what we do is we implement synchronization of Azure Active Directory from my on-premise. So basically, I have an on-premise native Active Directory solution. May that be a 2003, 8, 12, 16 server, something of that sort, and all of it can be directly synchronized to Azure Active Directory. The cloud provisioning fundamental, which is now available with Azure Active Directory already, is wherein even if you have a diversified identity structure, may that not even be on a Microsoft platform, you can sync it up all to your cloud-based identity solution. And Azure AD is now becoming, I can say, a protocol throughout the industry, across every cloud provider, across every service and solution provider, that they can authenticate using that user account. So here, what I mean to say is, I create an Azure Active Directory environment. I import all my objects from my on-prem AD. I import objects from other locations, from other different identity providers, or from somewhere. I channelize everything, configure everything in Azure Active Directory as per the relevant best practices in terms of security, in terms of protection, in terms of risk assessment, in terms of how, where, what the user will access, multi-factor authentication, and a lot more. And simply ask the user to have the same username used over any cloud solution that they wish to access. That may be on my Amazon, that even may be on my Salesforce, that may be on my Google Cloud, that may be even on, you can say, any other cloud vendor provider or any other cloud security solution, anything. So simple as that. Azure Active Directory, I can say in today's date, is becoming something that once upon a time my native Active Directory was. Like in our on-premise, we don't have even a single service, device, application that does not understand Active Directory authentication. Not even one. I can have every single aspect in my enterprise on-premise infrastructure getting authenticated across Azure, across my Active Directory. The same is what Azure AD is doing now when it comes to cloud. You go to any cloud provider, may that be a cloud database provider, may that be a cloud security provider, may that be a cloud storage provider, anything. Azure Active Directory users can now authenticate across any platform from anywhere using the uh, most authentication methods, I can say. So when I say most authentication methods, what I mean over here is like you can use OAuth, you can use SAML, the new and the most widely used application authentication protocols. These protocols can be used from my Azure Active Directory to authenticate across such applications. So keeping in mind over here what my identity solution in cloud can do, the possibilities are limitless. It gives you options to protect passwords because identity solution that we have in Microsoft 365 to a certain extent is also being protected using some AI level of solutions. So you can have your Azure Active Directory passwords which are not easily identified passwords. So if I go to my account in Azure or Microsoft 365 today and say that my password needs to be welcome1234, it will block it saying that, this is a banned password algorithm. You are using something which we have seen too many times and the password cannot be used in that way. Let's say I probably set a password which contains my first name and my date of birth. That will again be blocked, maybe saying that it is a global banned password list because you cannot have your first name inside your password from the security aspect. And custom banned password list is something that you define in your environment that you want to block. Isn't that great? Like I will define a solution wherein I will not allow a user to set a simple password. I will not allow a user to use his first name, last name, date of birth whatsoever. And at the same time, I will also not allow users to use an X level of passwords inside my organization. So in that case, you are actually defining the password to be so complex that it might be difficult for the user to remember. And that is what we want. Once the password is set, once MFA is enabled, each time the user wants to log in, simply needs to approve the authentication on his device. And once the authentication is approved, no need for entering password or no need for re-authenticating across any other device or for across any other application. When we talk about multi-factor authentication, you actually have three different aspects. Typically, when we talk about Windows, considering that on Android and iOS, you are by default going to have your iris scanner, you are going to have your fingerprint scanner, and you will also be able to use your Microsoft Authenticator application to approve based on codes what and how the user is trying to authenticate. You have something really exciting, which is Windows Hello for Business, and this is very, very powerful. Like it's as good as just the device. The camera should be capable. Of course, there are some hardware pieces. Just looking at the device and to unlock the PC. And the moment I have moved out of a particular radius, maybe using some Bluetooth device pairing, the device will automatically get locked. So we have various options, even including a smart card or a FIDO key, which when inserted to the device only, that's when the authentication will work. So these are options that can be used to go passwordless. I don't need my password to be in place each time I want to authenticate across any of my device. I have any of these options available, I can simply log in. You can implement conditional access, uh, limitless again. Define X level of conditions, define behavioral conditions, define sign-in based conditions, user based conditions, device based conditions, location based conditions, IP based conditions, and a lot more. Using all of these, I can actually block my users from authenticating anywhere across, or rather you can say anywhere beyond whatever has been whitelisted. I can ask the users to enter MFA. I can ask user for justifications of trying to log in at a place which is not permitted. We can ask for tracking the user's behavior real time as to where, how many times during a day, during a week, during a month is a user authenticating, based on which I can enforce even more security protocols to drill down more into in terms of protecting my data. So conditional access with identity protection works really great. You have n number of possibilities to control not only your own applications but even uh, an extent of some third party applications to make sure that that username and password wherever it's being used is being used safely. So risk privileges are always going to be categorized based on what and how you are planning to give access to the users. Administrators with the highest level of access are the ones which are the riskiest, because once their credentials are compromised, it's probably, you can say, your entire environment is exposed. So in that case, if I have to implement something to protect my administrator's access, what I can do is, for the administrators who actually need a really open access to the environment, the liberal most access, we can use fundamentals like just-in-time access and privileged identity management, which will allow me to grant user an access to the environment, which can be the liberal most, but for a particular period of time, maybe say 1 hour or 30 minutes, just to perform that administrative task, possibly on a trusted IP address. That is, he should be sitting inside a particular office on a particular device, which is compliant, which is secured, and a lot more. That's the level of security that I can implement for administrators who have the highest privileges. So identity protection is something which we need to focus on for a reason that you have 27 million odd compromised users in 2019 because of their passwords. You have more than 30 billion malicious activities or sign-ins which were blocked in real time, identifying that the login was a breach and nothing more. You have more than 900,000 high-risk sign-ins attempted just in the month of October 2019. These are some real-time statistics for you to understand how important it is to implement the identity solution in the right manner within our infrastructure. Identity protection will work at three different conditions. One will be a sign-in, another one will be the activity done, and the third one would be the credentials that are known. I mean, the credentials that the user has used to authenticate from Azure Active Directory on a particular application. So these are the three key areas which fall as a part of my protection module that I will implement on the users. Risk detections and risk engines work with a lot of uh, components together. Some of them are real-time detections, some of them are offline detections. Now, when I say an offline detection, the first one that we have is a typical travel. So let's say I log in on my device over here right away on this laptop. And then probably I go and spin up a virtual machine in Azure in West Europe, and I try to log in on that virtual machine. It will block my login, saying that this was an impossible travel activity. The user is traveling from India to West Europe within, say, 30 minutes. This is all analyzed in the backend based on the behavior that took place. So basically, right now, when I tried to log in, it took my IP address where I am currently. And when I'll try to log in from West Europe, it will take the IP address over there and try to identify which zones do these IP addresses belong to. And based on that, it will absolutely take the necessary action on that user account. Detections not linked to a sign-in. So this typically is a threat intelligence component, something really excellent, which will help to identify how a user has tried to log in and how the environment was compromised, not just by a sign in, maybe by accessing some file or maybe by accessing some resource which belongs to the corporate um, platform. And you get an alert like this. This is just a sample alert that you will be getting saying that a user at risk has been detected for some so and so reason. You get complete insight to the identities in your environment. It is going to give you a complete information, a deep insight to how the identities in your environment have been using it, how the identities in your environment have been working, and a lot more. And you will be able to see some blocking points like this for those users who have been controlled or picked up by your environment. So probably it will say that you cannot access this right now. Reason, probably you are trying to access it from a wrong location or your login was suspicious. Another one that can be showed is request denied. We have sent an identity verification, but the application, the authenticator application denied, maybe due to some condition that the authenticator application maybe is not being used in the right way. There are lot of such options which will be configured to make sure that the user also gets the correct response as to why the login has been blocked. So identity protection is something that you have in Azure by default. The only thing is you need to set it up in the correct manner in order to make sure how are we going to use it to protect the users that we have in our environment. It is going to give you a complete insight of a lot of things which probably cover your entire enterprise. So device state, the status of the device where the user using their identities, the operating system platform, the applications that are being used, the risk, whether it's a sign-in based risk, whether it's a location based risk, and the application on which the user tried to access the same. So when we talk about all of these, I am probably covering up every single aspect of my environment that I have set up in the cloud. Password management is something which can be done again easily through my portal. I can identify leaked passwords, passwords which have been easily compromised for a user for some reason. May that be in any manner, but I can define it. And at the same time, I can also set up an automation policy in order to make sure that when a user's password is leaked, what needs to be done. So maybe it can be block the sign in or immediately ask for a second level of authentication or something of that sort. Banned password list, it will again over here, as I said, you can define a custom list saying that you don't want so and so, you know, characters or some words to be used inside the password of the user. When it is enforced, it will say that it contains something that is easily guessable. Please try a different password. So this is something which you set up at the password level to make sure that the user is not setting passwords which can be easily used or identified. Password protection on premise. The same kind of a protection that you have implemented in cloud is what you can continue with, setting it up in your on-premise as well, so that your on-premise environment also runs as secure as your cloud environment. And when we talk about all of these, there will be multiple such factors that will form the base of the analysis. So it will be the brute force attack, whether it is done, it can be a dumpster diving, it can be a keylogger attack. Basically, what this means is that Azure Active Directory and identity management is not only going to analyze how why the identity has been blocked or what has been gone wrong, but it will also identify how that particular identity has been compromised. So in order to implement strong credentials, the only way you have is multi-factor authentication. because multi-factor authentication protects your user's account breach from happening most of the times, because password is something which will not be used, right? You will be going completely just application based or OTP based for logging on to a particular application or a device. The most secured ones are the push notifications. You can have a call or an SMS as well, but if the SIM is lost, you are again gone. So you can have your push notifications configured. You can have your one-time OTP tokens that can be sent, or you can even use an OAuth authentication. The highest ones which will be used, or which are the best ones to be used, are push notifications on the device. Now you will say push notifications also come on a mobile device, and if call and SMS is something which is on a mobile device, if I lose my handset, I'm even losing the access to the push notification. Ideally, no, because your calls and SMS are something which can still be used if your device is locked to get the OTP, because it will come up on the notification screen or the call can be answered. But when it comes to push notifications, it cannot be if the security has been set up correctly. So the minimal risk that you have is on push notifications, your tokens for OTP, and OAuth authentication service that you would use. Use your passwords to the minimum possible requirement, so that whenever you are trying to access your device, it is just one authentication and you're all good to go. So what I mean over here is single sign-on. This single sign-on can again be like you went to your laptop, you tried to log in, and it says that please approve on your device. And the moment you try to approve it on your device, you are just good to go. You don't need to enter your password all the time. So going passwordless with identity in our today's environment is something that is possible using Azure AD seamlessly. May that be for on-premise, may that be for third-party cloud providers, may that be for your hybrid solutions, anything. Here, doing passwordless is something that you will configure when it comes to your device management. So you will need to have your devices configured in a way that they are a member of Azure Active Directory, without which your passwordless environment will not be good to work, will not perform in the desired behavior way. Even conditional access setup will not work, because as you see over here saying that hybrid AD joint is required. So your on-premise devices can be connected to their on-premise Active Directory definitely, but at the same time they also need to connect to the Azure Active Directory environment. And once you have set it up all, your Windows 10 will stop popping you up for passwords. It will simply ask you for a multi-factor authentication. Each time the users will then try to log in, may that be on their personal device or a corporate owned device within or outside the environment, they will keep on getting prompts, and everything will be monitored thoroughly inside your Azure Active Directory logs or inside your Azure Analytics, in order to make sure that you get the complete insight as an administrator as to what is happening while the users are not under my corporate network and doing some kind of a remote working. So powering up your credentials in today's date is possible, as I said, by going passwordless. Passwordless is something which can be the foundation of your environment, and it can be delivered using your Windows Hello on Windows 10 devices, your Authenticator application on mobile devices, or some kind of a security token on Windows devices and Azure AD joined and registered devices. So this was a heads up on Microsoft Identity and Access Management, guys. Now we have some more time to spare on some questions that you would want to ask. We can happily address them, and then we should be good to close. Guys, the presentation that was given will be shared with you post completion of the session, as well as my credentials where you can connect with me if there is anything with regards to Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Cloud technologies, may that be Azure, AI, anything. We are I am currently handling the technical vertical for Microsoft Cloud under Redington, and we can get your queries answered at the earliest best possible. Thank you, everyone. I hope it was an informative session for all of you, and hope to see you in some further more sessions that we might conduct in the near future. Thank you.